Hey everybody, George Weber here, G Weber Arts. Today we're going to do another train video, but this time we're going to try to do a restoration to some degree, mostly a running restoration on this little old Athearn right here. And before we get started on it, let's see how it runs. Now, got my controller set up. Power is on, and I'm going to just turn it up a little bit here, a bit more, and we're up around 25–30%. And now I know this runs. It's just being stubborn. There it goes. So first thing is it makes part of it's the track. It makes sort of a grindy noise, as you probably hear. These fast tracks are hollow, so they tend to make a lot of noise, but it sounds a bit like a coffee grinder. And also, it is running in the opposite direction of the standard, which usually, if you put a train engine on facing right, it will go forward, such as this one. We'll just toss this on here. Okay, so I've got the power supply set to right, forward if you will. Then I've got this little engine on here. This engine's never been touched internally, and the normal wiring is that it goes forward, as you see. This one, when I do that, goes backwards, which tells me that something in the wiring or the trucks are possibly put in wrong way around. So we'll take a look inside there and see what's going on. I know there's a lot of other work to be done inside of it too, so I'm going to set up the camera and we'll get with that in just a minute. All right, let's take a look inside, shall we? Now, the first thing with this particular engine is the body mounts, which are two little tabs on the side that have locating pins, are both broken to some degree, so it just kind of slides right off. I may attempt to repair that later, but that's not what we're doing right now. So I'm not going to mess with that. And I'm just going to put the body shell over here, out of the way. Now, as you can see, this is got a lot of rust on it. That's typical for some of these old Athearns because they tended to use steel instead of copper, apparently, for a lot of these parts. So you'll typically see in these really older models a fair amount of rust. And we're going to try to get that off. Just a quick word, this is another train video sponsored by Swayze's Hardware and Hobbies here in Grass Valley. They supplied the train. That's about the extent of their sponsorship. That and giving me something to do the actual work. So anyways, I just wanted to say that real quick. So let's see what we're going to do with this to start with. All right, the first thing I think is to remove the spring clip. This is where the power comes. You got one power lead that's basically coming up through the frame, through the bottom of the motor, to a bracket similar to this one on the bottom of the motor, and that's one side of your power. And then this is the other side of your power, and as you can imagine, power is not going to flow through something with that much rust on it. And the top connector here, as you can see, is extremely oxidized, and yeah, you're just not going to get a lot of electrical flow. So there's that. Take the clip out. Let's see if the headlight bracket will come off. There we go. It just slides right out. One thing to remember with these old Athearns and many others for that matter is the frames were often cast and then machined a little bit. So they can be pretty fragile sometimes. So you really have to watch out not to literally snap them, because when they get old, they tend to get brittle. All right, let me find a couple of screwdrivers here. All right, there we go. Now these are the one-piece pinion gear housing, which is nice because they tend to come off a little bit easier. And I like to reach up through the wheel set and work the clip. It's not easy. And they can be very stubborn, but you want to be very careful if you can, because they tend to break. All right, that one's going to be very stubborn. Let's see if I can get this one up in here. No, it's too wide to do it that way, so I have to do it this way. And this is the direction I really don't like going in if I don't have to. There it goes. So that side popped up, and we come over here, and we just get a corner under there, and there it goes. All right. So that's your housing clip, and it's got two little clips on the sides here that just kind of catch on the truck frame. Some of these are two-piece, some are one-piece like this one is, and what usually happens is you wind up breaking off one of these legs, and that's what keeps the truck in place. So there's that one. Then we're going to lift out the pinion, or the worm gear, I should say. And you've got the universal joint here. You've got a small bronze bushing, usually a thrust washer, and then another small bronze bushing on this end, and another thrust washer on this end. And you don't want to lose any of that, so I'm just going to put that over there. Then we can pull this end of the universal joint off the motor, and that makes it much easier to just lift the frame and get the truck assembly out. All right, well, she doesn't look too bad in the gears. It's just dirty and a bit stiff, so we'll work on that. The other thing I have to remember is I want to turn these around. Why? Because in this orientation, I believe that's what's causing it to run backwards. Because this is the front of the engine here. And that's the back of the engine. So I need to swap the orientation. So that's now the front one. And I believe this will work, because that's a mistake that happens frequently when taking these apart and putting them back together, is not paying attention to the orientation and winding up putting it in backwards. I've done it myself. There we go. So there's that. And there's that worm gear. And there's this drive shaft assembly. Come on, don't be stubborn. All right. And then we spin that around this way. And we're just going to do a little drop-in test fit like that. And like that, and there we go. See, now we've basically flipped those around. And if I remember correctly, that will swap the polarity. Right? All right, so there's that. And there's the trucks. Now, the motor, you can disassemble these, but I try to avoid it for a number of reasons. The first reason being the motor mount, which is underneath here, is popped in usually with these little plastic rivety kind of things, and the whole thing tends to get very hard in old age, and then when you go to lift out the motor, the whole thing breaks, and then you need a motor mount, or you need to use something else to mount the engine in there that isolates it from the frame, and that, or semi-isolates it, I should say, because there is a electrical connection under there. It doesn't isolate it completely. So I tend to not take them out. First thing I'm going to do is going to get in here and clean up this commutator, and somewhere in there are the brushes, of course, hiding here and here, and they're held in by this clip and the clip below. So to do a little cleaning to start with, I'm going to use, and this is a popular item amongst people that work on their own trains. Get this straw stuck in the, that's being stubborn. CRC electronics cleaner. But be absolutely sure that you get the ones that are safe for sensitive electronics, quick drying, and plastic safe. Plastic safe. Because they make several different versions of this product, and some of them are too hot for plastics. If I can just get this nozzle to fit in there, gee whiz, sometimes they really make it difficult. There it goes. All right. So off camera here for just a second, I'm going to spray right here in the commutator, the armature's commutator and brushes, and I'm going to hose out some of the filth. I'm going to do the same thing right around the bearings to clean some of the gunk out of the bearings as well. So I'll be right back. All right, and I get pretty liberal with that stuff, because it really, really helps clean the motor. So we're just using a Q-tip and wiping the armature down. We're going to spray oops. New can sprays a lot. There's a lot of methods for cleaning these armature plates. Some guys will take a bit of pencil eraser and spin the motor and hold it on there, or rub away at it. I don't know. I'm not fond of that particular methodology. I just don't see that that one works. I mean, it does. It cleans off but I just don't know that it's the best. Now this stuff not only cleans, but it helps cut down on corrosion to some degree, anyways. And then some guys like to, not on these motors because they're hard to get into. Well, maybe on these, who knows? They like to use the Bright Boys that you use for track cleaning, which is an abrasive eraser, and get in there and just, polish it up. Again, not a methodology I'm super fond of. What I use when I can, because again, some of these motors are very hard to get inside of. Others are a little easier. Is I use a metal polish. In this case, I'm using Simichrome, which is, just basically a metal polish. It is, I'll say, slightly abrasive, but, on a microscopic scale, so it's not like you're leaving big gouging marks on the copper plates. And this stuff pulls the tarnish right up out of there. I mean, it's literally like it's a vacuum cleaner, and it's just sucking it right up out of the metal. It's crazy how well this pulls tarnish off the armature plates, or commutator plates, or whatever you want to call them. I suppose there's correct terminology and such. You can see how much more that's pulled up out of there. And I'm just giving it a good scrubbing all the way around. Yep, that looks pretty good. All right, now I'm going to blast it out with some more CRC. All right. All right, and you can probably see how much cleaner and shinier that is. So that makes a big difference. And what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to power that up. And we'll pop that on there like that. Now the top connector plate here is still pretty filthy, so yeah, I'm not getting good contact on the top plate. Let's see if I can all right, we'll do it the other way around just to be safe. All right, let's just make sure I am actually, yep, okay, we're hot. So I'm going to put the hot lead up there, and then I'm going to use this as a probe and get to the motor down there, and whee, there we go. spins right up. Perfect. All right, so while that CRC is evaporating, the last of it, I am going to you don't want to oil the motor while the CRC is still in there, because the CRC will clean the oil right back out of it. There we go. See, a little spin of the motor, and the brushes have left their trash all over the armature plates. So now that should be pretty good. All right, so I'm going to set that aside for the moment. And I'm going to clean this spring clip, which is what the power gets transferred through, or one side of the power gets transferred through, more accurately. Get this plugged in so I have some power. All right, so I got my Dremel. I'm going to use the lowest speed setting. I've got a soft wire brush. The hard wire brushes have a copper shaft. Don't use those. Use the soft wire one, at least to start with. Oops. If you're smart, you're going to wear some safety glasses, because wire brushes have a tendency of throwing wires. So I have my safety glasses on. I'm just going to be very careful not to catch the edges. And I'm going to get all this surface rust off. Because all of that surface rust is an oxidation and such is just ruining the electrical contact. We want this as clean as we can get it. Now, this one's pretty bad. It's got staining and whatnot from the rust that's right down in the metal, not just on the surface. But it'll be more than clean enough to get a good contact going once we get everything. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get out a buffing wheel, just like that, and I'm going to put some Simichrome on here. Now when you spin this up, it's going to throw that Simichrome everywhere, so know that in advance. Get this going. This is actually one of the parts of repairing these Athearns that, if you're going to do it, it takes the most amount of time. Eee, boy, don't do that. Because it just, this metal, it just doesn't want to polish easily. Once it gets rusted, it's just a real pain in the butt. Alright, so we're going to put that down, and while I've got this running and full of Simichrome, this top clip, we're just going to go right down the middle of it to start with. Look at that. Now don't stay on here a super long time and don't press down hard on it because one, it'll heat up and could theoretically melt the plastic underneath it. Two, you could burn the clip and flip it right off of there and knock the brushes out. Now put your thumb on it like that, and what you want to do is this area here where it folds over, that's really where you want to get it clean. So now that we've got everything polished up, isopropyl alcohol. Now a lot of guys just clean with isopropyl alcohol, and that works to an extent. I think using polishes and whatnot and CRC is more effective than alcohol, but alcohol is a good cleaning element for after to get up any remaining goo and whatnot, because there's always some. So I'll just wipe that down. I use 91% alcohol because it has less water in it, and water is a corrosive. And also, the higher the amount of alcohol, the faster it's going to evaporate. All right, now where's my spring clip? There it is. So we're just going to wash off the residue of the Simichrome and polishing. Just get in there real good and just get it all cleaned up and spiffy looking, because I can assure you the shinier that it is, the better the contact is going to be, number one. Number two, the longer it's going to fight off corrosion. Again, on these wire wheels, a couple of things to remember is wear your safety glasses, because wire wheels will throw metal sometimes. The other thing to remember is Dremel and other companies make two versions of these wire wheels. The first version has a metal shaft, steel shaft like this, and it's relatively soft for a wire wheel. Then they make one with a copper shaft, which is very hard wire, and you don't want to use that except for in extreme cases, because that one can just tear metal to pieces on these old trains. There we go. So I'm going to clean the top of this bracket. Like so. The underside. Slow and steady, because you don't want to catch an edge too much and have it freak out on you. Alright, there's that one. And then while I got that, I'll clean the frame. Yeah, that's way better. In this one. Oops, careful now. Alright, let's just do this real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Let's see if you can see this. Let's see what you see on the camera here. Get it to focus. There we go. Now you can see that frame plate is kind of dull looking. And I did clean that slightly just by hand. And this one, you can see, is very shiny. And that is where the difference comes in. I'm hoping that's not the case. Always the trouble with not being able to see the camera is seeing. Because when you can't see what the camera's seeing, you don't know if you're in frame or not, because you don't have a cameraman who takes care of that for you. All right. Give that a quick wipe. And those are pretty. All right. Now we're going to get in here. Getting right down on that plate of the Simichrome. There's lots of other metal polishes you can use too. You don't have to use Simichrome. I mean, go to the automotive supply shop. They have tons of them. A lot of guys like Mother's metal polish. They seem to like that one too. But yeah, there's lots of them that will do an excellent job. Okay, get a fresh one here. We're going to work on this part here, get it polished up on both sides. And some people might think this is overkill, but keep in mind, I went at this with a wire wheel. Right, that's pretty aggressive. And now I'm going after it with Simichrome. And that's pretty black. So that's a lot of crap that's still coming off of this metal. All right. So strangely enough, getting a model train to run exceptionally well is not so much about gobs of lubrication as it is more about polishing parts, because the whole thing that makes these things run is electricity, and if you don't have good electrical contact, you're just not going to get anywhere. All right. Now, if you wanted to do a kind of a hot rod modification on one of these things, some guys get rid of the metal clip and they go over to actually wiring to the motor and the chassis using a wire. And you can do that, but this is not what that is. This is just we're going to get them cleaned up and ready to run, and it's going to be box stock basically. All right, so now that we got that, we're going to get inside the trucks here. And we're going to make sure there isn't a bunch of excess lubricant gumming up the works. So you have a bottom plate, and it's got 4 clips. And then on some, not all, but some, frequently you have a little top clip too. And these can be a nuisance. A small screwdriver, I prefer to, some people will reach up this way and do it, and you can do that, but I find that if you go this way, up behind the wheels, it will frequently play much nicer with you. And not break any of the clips. There's that end. Come on. There we go. See, that played nice. It takes the bottom clip right off. And now we're starting to get access to the transmission. So next I'm going to pop off this one. Just like that. Oh, don't lose it. Yeah, don't lose it. Put those over there. Put that further over there. All right. Now, this thing will come apart just like that. Boom. Now this is the older metal frame. You know, this outer frame is all metal, which is the older version of the Athearns, which means that power comes from the wheel to this bearing housing, and then from the bearing housing up through, etc., all the way. Right? And the other side of the power comes through this. One other side of power comes through that. Fun, fun, fun. So, in order to make this run better, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Q-tip, take my wire cutters, cut that Q-tip in half just like that, and I'm going to take a dab of simichrome, say it right, simichrome, just like that, a little tiny dab on the end, and I'm going to shove it right in that bearing and give it a spin. And it's going to come out of there black. It shows you how dirty these things get. And then the face of it, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to polish that face as much as I can. This is a hard spot to get into, so it kind of limits you, but you can really still get it pretty clean compared to whatever it looks like prior. Oh yeah, that's way better. And I'll take another one, and I'll just put a little dab on there, and then I'll shove it right down in there again. And we're doing the opposite one now, the second one. Pop it out, and it's black. See? That is oxidation and whatnot. which is, again, mentioning it for the 97th time because it's important, messing with your electrical continuity. No electrical continuity, no go. Okay, and we blast that out with a little CRC. Give it a little wipe. Make sure everything is gone. Yep. Nice and clean. I'll clean the inside of this frame where the bearings for the gear shafts go. And then, just as a general cleaning, take a toothbrush and just kind of get the metal frame, the outside frame, just kind of brushed off, because sometimes you'll get crud in here. You know, if it's been sitting in somebody's attic for a while, there'll be a lot of crud in there, and just, it doesn't look nice. There we go. So that one is cleaned up. And then we pull out the gears. 1, 2, 3. Now I've found on some, not all, but some engines, if these gears go in upside down, they will make noise. And then when you flip them back over, they are fine. So that's probably from being run into each other for so long. That'd be my guess. So I try to keep them in the same order and position as they came out. So I'm cleaning off these shafts that go up through the gears, getting those clean. And there's virtually no lubrication in here. And they pretty much came that way, I think. And people tend to not lubricate them. And realistically, they don't need much. They need very little lubrication. People tend to seriously over-oil and over-grease. And worse yet, use the wrong oils or grease, because there are some oils and greases and whatnot that will, over time, attack plastic and destroy the plastic and cause it to crack and fracture. Another problem is some greases, they get old and turn into God knows what kind of substance it is, but it's sometimes as hard as rocks. So you want to make sure if you're going to grease these things, number one, use the right kind of grease. Number two, use the right amount, because it's really easy to get carried away. This is not a 64 Chevrolet wheel bearing. It's an HO model train. It does not need a pound of gear lube shoved into its butt. Yeah, that's filthy. If this was a differential for a 64 Chevrolet or a wheel bearing or something, that'd be a different story, but it is not. So lighten up, huh? Okay. All right, much better. We blast that out just real quick. Very good. A little toothbrush action on the outside. Fantastic. Okay, so now our two halves are clean. Very nice. Now, we are going to get our buffing wheel and drop it on our Dremel tool. And we are going to take the wheel assembly and we're going to put some, let me see if I can get this on camera for you, where you can really see it. Focus. All right. Can you see, where am I? All this crud on the wheel tread. You see all of that? That is dirt from coming up off the, come on, focus. You don't want to focus. All right, anyways, as I say, that is a lot of crud coming up off the track and whatnot, and we're going to clean all that off. We're also going to clean the axle shaft tips. I wish my camera would focus, but it doesn't seem to want to. So anyways, we're going to clean off the axle shaft tips here. There it goes. We're going to clean these off, and we're going to clean off this face here. And we're going to make sure there's nothing in the gears, because sometimes you get crap in there, but I don't think this one has anything in there. So, I'm going to put a little Simichrome on here, and we're going to schmutz it around. I'm going to get a little bit on there. Now, we don't want to polish the face of the wheel at all. We just want to get the axle shaft tip and the wheel. And that's where things get a little tricky. Also, these are pressed onto the axle, so we need to be very gentle, otherwise we could literally spin them right off. So I'm just going around gently around that axle shaft, putting almost no pressure to speak of. And then I'm going to go right around the wheel face, the tread. In the same way, just really gently. We're going to go around a couple of times so that we get the wheel tread and the flanges all nice and clean. Get a little alcohol. Go around like that. Yeah, that one's got some bad oxidation on it. Oxidation. So I'm going to switch over to the wire wheel for a moment. And super carefully work that wheel tread with the wire brush. It has some bad oxidation to the point where it's literally making little potholes in the wheel face. And that's not helping me any. My understanding is the wheels, um, depending on the era that they came from, some of them are basically they take iron powder or metal powder of some sort and they compress it into a mold. And I guess there's some heat involved as well. And that's how they get it to get the axle to stay on the wheel, the metal axle, by making it sort of in the two pieces cast together in a way, so to speak. Oh yeah, that's way better. So I have a feeling I'm gonna have to do all the wheels this way. Anyways, yeah, they basically, you have a metal axle and they put that in, and then they put in this metal powder or whatever it is, and they compress it and heat it and so forth and so on, and it fuses everything together. But from what I understand, that means that the metal is slightly porous. So anything you can do to polish it up real good is helpful. Oh yes, that is so much better. So I'm going to start with a wire wheel on this one just because it's pretty obvious that these are really bad. Much like my Dremel, apparently, it doesn't want to start up. I have to take it apart and clean its motor. All right, so before I go back to doing simichrome on these, because I've got so many of them to do, I'm going to quickly see if I can show you the difference. This is the one we just finished, and this is the one that we have not touched yet. You can see there's considerable difference. And that's going to make an enormous difference on being able to get electricity up off the rails and into the motor. Because that's what you want. My understanding is these Athearns, some of them go out of gauge pretty easily because I just felt that wheel turn. So in my box of tools, I have a wheel gauge. This is an official HO standards gauge from, the people that do the standards. Like, who is it? Oh, yes, NMRA. I always forget the acronym because I'm always thinking of the NHRA, which is the Hot Rod Association. Anyways, let's take a look at yeah, that's pretty good. Making sure that the spacing between the wheels is correct. Yeah. On some Athearns, the metal axle shaft and the plastic axle shaft starts to get loose and they tend to move around, and the gauge, the width of the wheel assemblies, gets out of whack, and the train will then attempt to run in ways that you don't want it to run. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my label plastic safe, 106 gear oil, or gear grease. This is actually grease. And I'm going to put a little bit on my screwdriver. Just a tiny bit. And I'm going to put it down here and down here, because this is the face where the gear is going to run up against. Now, one of the things that's funny about greases is it gives you lubrication, but until the engine actually warms up, it can make your performance just slightly sluggish. That gear goes like that. That gear goes like that. This one goes here, just like that. Fantastic. And then, because gear lube, especially grease, being on the slightly thicker side, when it's cold, tends to be kind of gummy. So that is one reason for not putting a lot in there. And I can tell you, there have been some engines I've taken apart and cleaned that the amount of gear lube in them was just unbelievable. It was like, geez, what are these people thinking? Alright, so we're going to pop that wheel assembly in like that. Come on, get on there. There we go. Get the gears to mesh. And then we're going to drop this one in there. And those gears mesh. Very nice. And then even though I've put heavy gear lube in there, just a touch, I'm taking the lighter 102 and I'm going to put just a tiny drop where the shafts are. And that will get down in there. Okay, perfect. And that just makes for a slightly thinner oil, and it will mix with the heavier grease. And between the two of them, eventually they will create a thinner oil. Sometimes I actually mix the two together to start with, and then put it on the gears, because you can do that too. All right, now that that's assembled, just like that. Again, I'm going to take just a tiny bit, get some fuzz on there, and I'm just going to put it on that gear right there. Not much. Again, I'm using like a little tiny bit. It'll spread around, don't worry about that. And on the axle gear right there, like that, just a little tiny bit. A little tiny bit. Alright. And then we take our bottom plate, get it centered up, pop it in place just like that. Come on, get on there. Very good. And our top clip, which goes over on this end. And we just pop that on there like that. Beautiful. And now, just work that in a little bit. All right, so I'm going to go off camera for a bit and do this other truck because it needs doing. And then we'll come back and we'll do the final assembly and lube, and we'll put this bad boy on the track and see what it does. All right, so I'm going to be back in a little while.